this is an HTML page with some JavaScript embedded that will calculate the miles per gallon. It's a simple sequence application of getting the input, doing the calculation or processing, and then outputting. It's very fundamental on how it gets input and output, and probably not the technique you will use, but it's a beginning. I will show you another way to do this shortly. Notice it's just a regular HTML document. And just like CSS, it is possible to embed your CSS inside the HTML page. It's also possible to embed the script within the HTML page. The first script element is doesn't really apply to what we're studying. This is just what's known as a shiv, so that any browsers that still don't support HTML5, it will be able to use. But this is the script that the developer added. Notice all the code inside is JavaScript code. And you'll notice some of the syntax. We have semicolons at the end of the line. Here's one without one. One odd thing about JavaScript is it will forgive you if you do forget your semicolon, but get in the habit of always putting the semicolon in at the end of the line. Now notice that the script is not inside a function. So as the page is loading, the browser is just doing each of these in order. So it's going to run the script prior to even getting the body and loading this page. Here we have our script, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. And in Notepad++, you can just go to run in whatever browser you like. So it's gotten to the very first statement, and you'll notice this is called an alert box. It's very similar to a message box if you've done C#. And there is a prompt that says enter miles driven. Let's take a look at what statement is doing this. So the very first line of code, line 8 here, we're declaring a variable called miles. Notice the var is the keyword for declaring a variable. To get that alert, actually it was called a prompt, it's called an input box in C#, we will use the prompt command and followed by an argument inside parentheses. It's a string argument that says enter miles driven. Whatever is input into this input box will then be assigned to the variable miles. I'm going to enter 300 for the number of miles driven. Now a very similar statement will be prompting for how many gallons were used. So I'll enter 10. And let's take a look at that statement. So after line 8, in which we get the input to miles, notice that miles will be converted to a numeric data type. That's what this parse float is doing. So float is going to allow decimal places. Then the next statement is very similar to the first, in which we're using the prompt followed with a text argument, and that will be assigned to the variable gallons. And following that, same similar parse float to convert that to a float or a decimal numeric. And after that statement, you will notice a variable being declared called MPG. And this time no input. So this is our processing step where we're going to take the miles that was input divided by the gallons that was input, assign it to MPG. Just to make sure that we have a numeric data type, that MPG we're going to convert using the parse int. So we took the float, but we want to output an integer here. So part int is being applied. Our command for output is alert. Now a prompt and alert are both going to pop up a window. The prompt will pop up a window with a text box for input. The alert just pops up a window showing the string here. So we are concatenating the string literal miles per gallons equal, and you notice the end of the quote there. The plus sign is our concatenation operator. And notice that even though MPG is an int, it will convert automatically to string using if this is a string. So this plus sign is known as an overloaded operator. It can do two things. It can add numbers if each of the variables is a numeric data type. Plus sign can also do string concatenation. If one of your two operators are string, then it's going to convert any other operator that's numeric to a string, and it will treat this as a string operation. Let's see what happens with the application. So here is that output from the alert, and it's outputting. Notice there's no text box for input, so the alert just shows you this string. We'll click OK. I want you to take a look. There's no text here in the browser window. Why not? Why is there no text? Well, notice we're still in the head, so the body hasn't even loaded yet. But we're starting to go down, so as soon as I click that OK to close this alert box, you will see that it will process the body, and then we're going to see the H1 value display. Okay, I'm going to click OK, and there's the H1 value displayed. So that's our first JavaScript application. Let's look at the second one, and I would say this is the preferred way to do input in the next application. Here is the next application. I'm going to go ahead and run it so you can see what it looks like. You will see now that the text boxes are in the browser window itself. That's much better than using those pop-up windows, especially with people having pop-up blockers. So we've got two text boxes for input, and then we got something for output, and we got a button to cause the event handler. Notice that the calculations and the output, the script hasn't run yet. The script did run automatically in the first example, so let's see why. I want you to notice this script is a part of a function, that this is a function, and here is another function. So all of the scripts are in functions. In C#, there was one function that always automatically executed. That was the main function. In JavaScript, there are no functions that automatically execute. Now, you can write a function that you can say to start up after the window loads or after the body loads. Okay, so here we have a function. Now, this will not execute automatically. It's going to load all of this script, and it's going to remember there are three functions. This function has the name $. This function has the name calculate miles per gallon, and this function is an event handler. So when the window, and when we're talking about a window, it's an object. It's talking about the browser window. When it's loading, it's going to execute these. These are called event handlers. Okay, this is an event handler. We're wiring up this event handler to do this. We'll talk about that in a minute. Because all of these are in functions, what's going to happen is it'll be in memory but not execute it, and it'll go on down to the body, and it has created this section which is styled with CSS, and we have a lot of elements that can get input. So we've got a text box and a label. We've got another text box, another label, another text box. But notice it's got the attribute disabled, which is why the output box is grayed out. The user can't click in and enter any data in it, but we can still display data in it. And then we have a button. Now, if you've watched Bob Tabor's video, he added the event handler right here. So there was in here an on-click event handler, and then the name of the event, the name of the function, which is calculate miles per gallon right there, that would execute. And there's some intelligence here, and that is one way to wire up. I'm going to say it's kind of a dated way, and it's actually preferred to wire up as we have in line 25. The reason for this is we are closely tying the script to execute based on this button, based on the content, based on the HTML. However, by wiring up the button in the source code, we're kind of separating the behavior or the JavaScript from the HTML. So it is now preferred to do this. So wire up means assign the click event or assign an event listener to some type of object. Okay, so let's see. This is the way Bob Tabor did it. It does work. But let's take a look at this, what's going on. If you've watched Bob Tabor's videos, you might have noticed that there was a get element by ID. It's a method of the document object. The document object is your HTML page, okay? GetElementID takes an argument of an ID. That is an ID such as what you see here: miles, gallons, MPG, calculate. What's going to happen with GetElementById is it's going to say, I need to retrieve, now let's say I need to retrieve whatever element has that ID. Now where did that ID come from? This ID is, well, whatever ID is sent as an argument to this $ function. So the sole purpose of this $ function is to get the element so that you can work with it, okay? It's kind of like a control, right? Like a text box control in C#. However, you don't drag and drop it. This is like a control, okay? And it has properties, but instead of big properties windows here, the properties are listed like this. Okay, so what's going to happen is when this $ is typed out, it's going to run this function and it's going to use this argument. All right, I need to get the calculate, and that's retrieving this whole ID. And it's assigning to the onClick property here, calculate MPG. So this statement is doing exactly the same thing as that statement, but it's separating the HTML from the JavaScript, which is preferred. And I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Okay, so here's the application, and I went ahead and entered some data into the text boxes here. And before I click the calculate button, which is wired up to call that function, I'm going to go ahead and put a break in. So I hope that you've seen the video and taken the quiz on breaks. I am in Chrome, so I'm going to open up that inspect. Okay, inspect is open, and I'm going to come over here to sources. And my sources actually is in the HTML. Sometimes you'll see that you can have an external JavaScript file. So in the future, it'll be an external JavaScript file. For right now, it's the HTML page. Okay, so number of ways to put a break in here, but one way to put a break in is just click on the line here, line number, and I've got a break. Okay, so how do I start that to executing? I have to come over to my code window, and when I rearrange the code window, you'll notice that this pane went down to the bottom, and I'll click on that click event handler, and notice it says pause in the debugger, and I got a little arrow if I want to start stepping through the source code. Okay, I think I'll resize this again. And we have paused on line 13, in which it's going to use, there's that GetElementById again, and it's going to go to the miles. Well, let's see, where's the miles? Where's ID equals miles? So it's going to go to this text box. Now it says type equals text. Okay, so it's going to go to this text box, retrieve the data, assign it to the variable miles. Let me go ahead and step into that. And let's see what it says here, that miles is 300. Well, that's correct. Okay, let's step again. And now it's giving me note in the locals window that gallons is 10. And we'll step into it again. And it's made the decision if is not a number, miles, or is not a number. So is NaN. It means is not a number. Let's make sure that we can do math with this. What Bob Tabor did was, I believe he used the length to see if there was null data entry. Okay, so if those are not a number, oh, I neglected to show you, you actually can see the value of the variables right here on the side too. So if both are, if any of those is not a number, it's an error. And here's the error message with an alert, which is what we saw the output happen to in the last program that we were looking at. Else, if it falls in the else, both were numeric input, and here we're doing our processing. var miles per gallon equals miles divided by gallon. And here we're doing our output. So it's saying, okay, go to this element and set the value property. Now, if you've taken C#, this would be like saying text miles per gallon dot text. But instead of dot text in HTML, any input element, what's displaying in that input element is shown in the value property instead of the text property. Okay, so same thing, it's just the value property, and then it's whatever value is in the miles per gallon. And notice we have a dot to fixed. So this is just saying, you know, what if the output would have been 33.333333? Well, this is fixing the number of decibels being displayed to 1. Okay, so let's step into that one. Okay, and we'll see that miles per gallon calculated to 30, but it's not output yet. And then we'll step one more time, and we are done with this function. I'll go ahead and close this window, and you will see we have 30, only 1 decimal because of the 2 fixed. So I'm hoping this will help you use this source code as a model for the programming assignment I'm going to ask you to write this week.